Hi everyone, Gnev here. People my age usually have goals, such as founding a family, finding a better job, or traveling across the world. My goal, however, which I set about 4 months ago, was a bit different. I told myself that I have to reach Master Tier in League, and I completely devoted myself to it. I come to you now victorious, to share my journey and the things I learned on the way. Hopefully you learn something useful from it as well. First, I need to disclose where I stood before taking on the challenge. I've been playing the game on and off for around 12 years, peaking at rank 350 on EONE when I was around 18 years old. The game has a special place in my heart, and almost every season, every year I grind to Diamond 4 just to remember what I did before. This challenge, however, was a lot harder than that, so let's begin. The first game I played this season was of Veigar, and I was obviously very rusty. Looking at my scores, I was lucky to go 5-5 in promos because I got gapped in almost every game. Thinking back at it, I think my biggest problem in these games was nothing else but my own ego. I came into it with my chest out and head held up high, thinking that I'll destroy the first games, but I was soon humbled by EU West Smurfs. I kept grinding with Veigar, who was pretty strong at that time, but then a tragedy happened. I fell in love with Zoe, and before you call me a pedo, I mean with her gameplay. She was a champion that I never played before, and she was just so fun to me. I had a few good games with her in the beginning, which was a tragedy in the long run, and I quickly reached Gold 4. I kept spamming Zoe, thinking that I'll eventually get good enough with her to carry all my games, but I found most success when I swapped to mechanically easier champions, such as Anivia, Kayle and Xerath. And that's where the first lesson of the video comes in. If you want to reach a high rank in League, your main goal shouldn't be to have fun. I know that sounds awful when spoken out loud, but if you really want to reach a certain rank, try focusing on the champions that are strong at the moment and the ones you do well at, not the ones that are fun to you. It's really hard to drop a champion on which you aren't performing that well, but be honest to yourself. Look at your win rates and performances and just play the champion that you do well on. I know that sounds simple, but I really wish I could go back in time and tell that to myself. Even though I dominate every game on Kayle, almost doubling my average CS on Zoe, I kept spamming her, ending up with a 45% win rate and losing a bunch of time and MMR. I had a lucky break, however, when I found that Talia, who was a champion I loved playing before, was pretty broken. Her E spell got changed in path 12.9, so it stuns people who dash for it, and nobody knew how to play against her. I had a few solid games, and like an idiot, went back to spamming Zoe. Because I was still a bit more skilled than my opponents, I kept winning most of my games, and finally, when I reached Gold 1, I realized how dumb I was, and I started spamming Talia. Now look at the impact swapping your champion can have. I was winning almost every game, only losing the ones where my team was uncarryable. And unsurprisingly, I got Plat 4 very quickly. This is where I fell into a nice rhythm. The games were fairly easy, and I was able to have a huge impact on the team. I also found Ari during this time, and there really wasn't much wrong I could do on her. She was fairly simple to play, hard to punish, and I was able to always be useful on her because of her E and ultimate. My pace was insane, and I was gaining ranks quickly. I didn't fool around first timing champions. I was focused and confident, and P3 came in a blink. P2 even quicker. I even got close to P1, but then tragedy struck. Even with me playing pretty well, with the obvious exception of a few games, I just kept losing. Now here's the second thing I learned and the second lesson of the video. The game is 90% mental, and even though most of us who play it are extremely addicted to it, you won't do yourself any favors by spamming games when your mental just isn't there. What I suggest in that case is having a Smurf account, where you go and chill when you just aren't performing on your main. Don't get hooked on it too much though, because you're on a mission, and if you keep spamming lower ranked games, you'll get used to playing at a lower level, which will hurt you in the long run. Just try to balance those two out. Again, I wish I knew that back then, but I just kept spamming games even on the days where I played like shit, and my rank suffered for it. Everything passes though, including the hard days, and I was soon back on the grind. I finally realized that Kale is my strongest champion, and I went to her to pull me out of the dirt. Stats don't lie, and with a few good decisions, I was P1 before you know it. I picked up Oriana again for a short while, and it's here that I want to shift your attention to an interesting fact. Check out how my wins and losses are always grouped together. Some of you may call it loser skew, which is a myth, but I mostly attribute it to my mental state. You could have 8 wins in a day, and if you lose one, at least in my case, your mental will be noticeably down, and your focus may drop. Keep that in mind and combine it with the last advice to have a Smurf ready, and you'll see noticeable gains in your rank. It was at this time that I decided to pick up ADC again, as I had a feeling that my bot lane always ends. When I was in my heyday, young Ignev mained ADC, and I always felt that the role was my calling, perhaps because I simped for Legolas too much when I was a kid. Anyway, I had a few good games on Tristana and Ashe, going straight back to mid after. I soon entered my diamond promos, and they were a complete disaster. I went 0-3, and then decided to whip out my secret weapon, Annie. You see, in the world of gaming, I'm a boomer. My reactions and mechanics aren't even close to what they were when I was a kid, which is probably why when I go on simple champions such as Annie, which don't really require a lot of speed, I can easily beat my opponents on pure experience. Even with all my cockiness and experience though, I wouldn't see my next promos for the next 60 games. My MMR was extremely fucked, and I was close to catching up with my old skill at this point, and that's when I started doubting myself. The only thing I could do at this point, however, was to learn and improve, and with a solid amount of time and a lot of rage, the next promos came. My first game I had a good team, the second one I completely popped off, the third one I played solid but still lost, and the fourth one I reunited with my boy Ez, carried the game, and I reached Diamond. This was where my skill level got equal to my opponents. I knew that in order to reach Masters I had to improve a lot. The hardest part of the climb just began. I played 87 games before reaching Diamond 3, only to drop back down in the next 3 games. I was officially hard stuck, gaining 15 LP for a win and losing 17, and I have to say that it was a goddamn struggle. I was constantly switching between ADC and mid, not really excelling on any of the roles. I would often die to dumb ganks on mid, and I would depend on my support too much when on ADC. I knew I had to make a change. Luckily that was when I fell in love with Senna. She was pretty strong at that point, and I found out that support was the role where I could gap my opponents the hardest. While support players usually understand the game pretty well, my mechanics were just better than my opponents, unlike on mid, and I was winning almost every lane, getting to still live my ADC fantasy while supporting, and soon enough I was D2. I lingered a bit at this rank, experimenting with champions such as Amumu and Renata, often going back to ADC and dinting my ass off on Ez. I was constantly swapping between D3 and D2, but my Senna stood like a rock, and after some struggle, I was finally D1. I was so close to reaching my goal then, and I felt anxious before queuing for every game. I was gaining 14 LP and losing 18 or even 20 in some games. Every match felt like the world's finals, and soon I reached D1 80 LP. I remember going out with a friend that night, talking with him about it like I was going to Worlds myself tomorrow. I remember saying all I need to do is win the next 5 games and I'm done. I'm there. But life is not a fairy tale, and before you know it, I was D2 again. This was by far the hardest point for me in the challenge. I was broken, and instead of stopping and taking a break, I kept playing, even dropping to D3 again pretty quickly after. Imagine that you worked on something for 2 months, getting so close to the finish line, only to lose it in a day. It felt like I lost 30 kilos, only to gain them back. As if my fiancé left me the day before the wedding. As if I was a day from getting my college diploma, only to be taken back to 3rd year. It felt dreadful. But in that dark place, where we all go from time to time, I found the most indestructible force in the world: human will. I woke up the next day, sat down on my PC, and I goddamn started grinding again. Hours became days, days weeks, weeks turned into a month, but I was still committed. I was flowing between D2 and D3 again, slowly gaining confidence by the day, but I still needed the X factor. That's when I picked up Nautilus, and even with him not being the strongest in the meta, I found that I really enjoyed his playstyle. I noticed that I could hugely impact games by peeling for my teammates and creating kill opportunities everywhere on the map. And that's when it hit me. I checked the stats for supports, and I finally opened my eyes to possibly the strongest champion in the game at this point, Brat Tarik. For some reason, even with him being extremely overpowered, nobody was playing him, but my eyes were finally opened. I got to D2 the same day. D1 again only 5 days after. And then a beautiful thing happened. My long-awaited win streak. For the first time in my life, I was in Masters promos. I can't describe the excitement I felt at this point. It felt more important than any exam I had in college. More important than any date I had in my life. But I was confident, and I dove straight in. The first game was textbook. Complete and total domination on the bot lane, leading to an easy win. The second game, a torture. A long, drawn-out battle where the opponents were in the lead for the whole game, but they somehow managed to rip it from their claws. I was one win away, trying not to allow myself to celebrate prematurely, and I did the only thing I could do at that point. I pressed the play again button. Now you know how in League the interest can sense that you have a lot on the line. My Yone absolutely ends the game and goes 1-13. It's fine, I tell myself, I only need to win 1 game in the next 2. I'll be fine. We completely int bot lane, going 2-11, and I lost my second chance. Now here's where all the lessons came together. I knew that I could easily int my next game, and I finally learned from my previous mistakes and went to sleep. Oh, the excitement I felt when I woke up. Everything was riding on 1 game, and I knew that as long as I had Brat Tarik, I was ready. I finally got good teammates with Kiana and Kaisa carrying the game, and the enemy surrenders.
Victory!
I can't describe in words how happy I felt at this point. There really aren't many things that can be compared to the feeling of finally getting something that you invested a lot of time and effort in. Be it a girl, a job, or just a rank in League of Legends. Thank you for watching. I hope you go out and achieve your own goals, whatever they may be.